Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly wild piece of rock and roll history. Now, sitting here in 2026, the whole idea of UFOs, well, it doesn't seem quite so taboo anymore, right? I mean, we've got the US federal government actively releasing its UFO files, and honestly, a majority of people casually accept that alien life and technologies are probably out there. But man, flashback 52 years ago, and it was a completely different story. Today, we're looking back at a bizarre night when one of the most famous musicians on the entire planet had a bona fide close encounter of the first kind.
Okay, let's dive into this. It's August 23rd, 1974, and the most logical question we've got to ask to kick things off is, what exactly was John Lennon doing standing completely naked on a New York City rooftop just shouting at the sky? Seriously. To understand how this iconic Beatle ended up in this incredible, chaotic situation, we really need to set the scene and walk through exactly how this fateful Friday evening unfolded.
Section 1. A hot August night. You know, to get how John ended up on that roof, we first have to look back at his famous Lost Weekend era, which he spent mostly at a penthouse apartment over on East 52nd Street overlooking the East River. Let's walk through the timeline of how the seemingly totally mundane day turned completely upside down for John and his partner May Pang. During the day, John was over at the record plant East Studio, grinding away, putting the finishing touches on his upcoming album, Walls and Bridges. By 8 p.m., he and May head back to the apartment to just unwind. It was one of those sweltering New York nights, but eventually the air cooled down enough for May to shut off the AC and open up the windows to catch the river breeze. Okay, 8:30 rolls around, and May decides to jump in the shower, leaving John alone in the living room looking over some album artwork. And then, right around 9 p.m., that quiet evening is absolutely shattered.
Section 2. The close encounter. Because that relaxing night, it was about to take a frantic turn out on the balcony.
May steps out of the shower to the sound of John just frantically screaming her name from the outside terrace. She later recalled him sounding absolutely panic-stricken. So she bolts through the living room, runs out onto the balcony, and finds John standing there, completely unclothed, by the way, pointing wildly up at the southeastern sky. John actually wrote this incredibly detailed, brilliantly frantic account of the whole thing for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine. He wrote, and I quote, "What the Nixon is that, I says to myself, hovering over the next building no more than 100 feet away was this thing." He described his brain just going into overdrive, desperately trying to rationalize it. Like, is it a helicopter? No, it's making zero noise. A balloon? No way, balloons don't look like that and they don't fly that low. He was totally captivated. He said he literally never took his eyes off it for a second.
Now, you've got to love the contrast here. You have John in this state of intense, almost spiritual awe, and then you have May's reaction, which is so wonderfully grounded. Once she got over her own initial disbelief that she was actually looking at a spaceship, she kind of just started to laugh. She pointed out how completely absurd the situation was, telling John, "Suppose it's looking at us. Maybe they think everyone who lives on the East Side wanders around naked on their terraces on Friday evenings. We look like Adam and Eve."
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what they were staring at. This is an actual hand-drawn sketch by John Lennon himself. Knowing he had to get this down on paper, he grabbed a pen and an envelope right after the sighting. You can clearly see his whiteboard-style doodle here. There's the New York skyline, the East River, and those two little figures pointing up. That's John and May. And hovering just above the buildings is this distinct classic flying saucer shape.
Let's break down the exact features of this craft, because this wasn't just some blurry streak of light in the distance. They described a textbook, circular, saucer-shaped object. It had these flashing white electric lights all along the bottom rim, and then one single non-blinking red light right on top. But the thing that really spooked them both was the silence. It was completely silent. They could hear the hum of city traffic way down below, but this massive craft just above their heads, not a sound. It was hovering no more than 100 feet away, gliding super slowly, John guessed maybe 30 miles per hour, just cruising below the highest rooftops right toward the United Nations building.
Section 3. Searching for evidence. Because, look, after witnessing something that unbelievable, your immediate instinct is to find proof, right?
So the couple watches this thing veer sideways, slowly cross the East River towards Brooklyn, hover for a sec near the Williamsburg Bridge, and then, boom, it shoots straight up into the sky and disappears. While this was happening, May actually managed to scramble inside and grab her 35mm camera. And get this, it was loaded with testing surveillance film. They snapped away, praying they caught undeniable proof. They instantly called their photographer friend Bob Gruen, handed over the roll and told him to develop it ASAP. But check out this irony. Gruen developed their role right alongside two of his own standard roles. His photos? Perfectly fine. But John and May's entire role? Completely blank. The sprockets were flared out, making it look like the film had been massively overexposed or run through some crazy, high-powered radar.
But honestly, even without the photos, the corroborating evidence they pulled together that night was astounding. First off, John enthusiastically calls Yoko Ono at the Dakota to tell her all about it, and hilariously, Yoko wasn't skeptical at all. She was actually just suffering from major UFO FOMO, complaining multiple times that she'd missed the whole thing. Meanwhile, Bob Gruen is working the phones. He calls the local police precinct and they casually confirm, yeah, they've already got 3 local reports. He calls the Daily News, who confirm 5 reports from the east side. In fact, May Pang later noted there were an estimated 400 total sightings reported across New York City that night. They definitely weren't the only ones looking up.
Section 4. Art imitating alien life. This incredibly bizarre night left a huge mark on John, and he made sure to proudly immortalize it in his work.
Just a short time later, when his album Walls and Bridges dropped, John made absolutely sure his experience was officially on the public record. If you look at the opening page of the album's lyric booklet over on the left, he specifically requested a printed note that read, "On the 23rd Aug, 1974 at 9 o'clock, I saw a UFO, JL." And then, check out the right side. Look at this other whimsical doodle he included on the packaging. He stuck a flying saucer, literally labels with the word UFOer, right in there, alongside his caricatures and New York imagery.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this 1974 sighting wasn't actually John's first brush with the cosmos. He had a deep, lifelong fascination with aliens. Way back in the Beatles days, he was an actual subscriber to the British journal Flying Saucer Review. He even privately confessed to May that he believed he was abducted as a child back in Liverpool, an experience he said always made him feel kind of different from everyone else. He had these wild theories, too. Like he speculated that UFOs actively pull energy from nuclear plants, like the Indian Point facility upstate, to counter gravity. But the biggest takeaway? He fully believed that if the public ever truly accepted the reality of aliens, it would naturally spark a global political revolution.
And that deeply profound, yet totally casual acceptance of the unknown is just perfectly captured in a lyric from his posthumous 1984 track, Nobody Told Me. He sings, "There's a UFO over New York and I ain't too surprised." It's just so quintessential John Lennon, right? Staring face to face with the completely extraordinary and just reacting with a cool, spiritual shrug.
So what does this all mean? We arrive here at our final question. Was this whole night just an elaborate optical illusion? Maybe some secret military test? Or did visitors from another world actually drop in to check out rock royalty on a hot August night? Looking back from where we sit today in 2026, as society inches closer and closer to embracing these unexplained phenomena, John's sighting feels a lot less like a rock star's eccentricity and way more like a visionary getting an early glimpse into a much larger universe. It leaves us pondering exactly what John must have been thinking while gazing out over the East River. Who exactly is watching who? Thanks so much for exploring this awesome explainer with me, and as always, keep seeking the truth.